Well, ladies and gentlemen. We got some information on jokester Folie dicks. Essentially, this article looks like it's going to be a deep dive into exactly how it all happened. You know, I believe it sort of talks about like whether or not Todd Phillips had full creative control on the project. I believe he did, from what I've heard. It's going to talk about like whether or not it was a studio that ended up ruining the movie somehow and whatnot. So it's just this variety article that I think looks interesting, so we're gonna read through it. I may or may not end up spoiling the movie. It kind of just depends on if I feel like I need to in order to make a point. I guess I'll try not to, but yeah. Let's get into it. So it's called Inside the Joker Folly Dicks Debacle. Todd Phillips wanted nothing to do with DC on the $200 million misfire. On September 30th, Lady Gaga blew kisses to fans outside the TCL Chinese Theater ahead of the premiere of Jokester Folly Dicks, while Joaquin Phoenix dropped his typical solemn facade and flashed a few smiles from the red carpet. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav dropped by the after-party at Sunset Tower and mingled with the film's two high-paid lead actors as the meatless sliders, vegan Phoenix's idea, made the rounds. Didn't he? I feel like when he, I don't remember what he said, but I feel like during his Oscar acceptance speech when he won the Best Actor Oscar for the first Jokester movie, didn't he give like some bizarre speech about veganism? I don't remember what he said, but I feel like he did. Anyways, that doesn't matter. uh, For all the star wattage on display, there were some notable no-shows, namely DC Studios toppers James Gunn and Peter Safran. And this makes sense because they had mentioned that Joker Folly Dicks is not a DC Studios movie, right? It sort of, because when James Gunn and Peter Safran took over, they sort of were they were set to shepherd the DC film franchise, and they kind of seemingly took some kind of ownership over like the Flash and Blue Beetle and Aquaman. They've kind of taken over ownership over like the Penguin and the Matt Reeves Batman sequel, but they made it very clear that Jokester Folly Dicks is not a part of DC Studios. It is like they don't take any ownership over it. It is all a Todd Phillips thing. It's more of a Warner Brothers movie than it is a DC Studios movie. So it does make sense that they wouldn't be there. And by the way, when I say take ownership, like people, because James Gunn made this like big social media post being like, the good start for DC Studios with the Penguin and Superman, like the Christopher Reeve Superman documentary. I think it's called Super/Man. Um, and I saw like people, a lot of them are like, Snyder fans that are just really mad that the Snyderverse didn't continue, and they were like, James Gunn is trying to take ownership over, or he's trying to take the credit for the Penguin and for the Superman documentary, and it's just like, no, they just are DC Studios properties. Like, when a studio acquires a movie, like they acquired the Christopher Reeve documentary, that's not like the studio head trying to take credit for the movie. Like, whoever directed that documentary still has all the credit. Like, them, acquiring the Batman crime saga, which is the Robert Pattinson Batman universe, and them like a DC Studios forming and then sort of enveloping over the Penguin and whatever else comes from that universe. That's not James Gunn taking the credit away from Matt Reeves. This was like a side thing that I saw on Twitter going down, and it's just like, guys, you're all being a little silly. Could we not be silly? That would be helpful, I feel like. But yeah, even higher Joker Folly Dicks, it seems like Todd Phillips just didn't want to do that. So anyways, insiders say the duo's glaring absence for a film that is based on one of the biggest draws in the DC canon underscores a dysfunctional dynamic that played out behind the scenes on the ill-fated Warner Brothers musical. Todd Phillips wanted nothing to do with DC during the making of the film, says one agent familiar with the director's unique carve-out, which allowed him to bypass any oversight from the brand's gatekeepers. Although Gunn has publicly supported the film on social media, Phillips has distanced himself from DC. As the animated title card sequence unspooled inside the iconic Hollywood cinema in the opening minutes, it became apparent that Phillips had just given DC the middle finger. There was no DC Studios logo. And it's like, to some extent, I can kind of respect this from Todd Phillips. I mean, obviously, given how the movie turned out, it's it's for the best as far as DC Studios is concerned, because them being able to say that their first projects are The Penguin and Super/Man, that Christopher Reeve documentary, like that's actually like a fantastic start for DC Studios. And if they can follow that up with a really great Creature Commandos and a really great Superman film, I mean, that's going to be really good for them. By the way, can I just mention, this is really bad camera quality. I'm kind of trying to improve my workflow, and I'm having to record some videos not from my home. So this is just the webcam that I have, and sometimes I might have to record videos with this webcam, and it's bad. It's really bad, and I understand that it's really bad, but I just ask that you work with me here. It's more of an audio experience, Listen to this video while you're washing your dishes, you know what I mean? Anyways, we're going to continue reading. If the first movie was about some down on his luck, mentally ill guy in a downtrodden city, it makes maybe $150 million worldwide, not $1 billion, says a source familiar with the internal awkwardness. People showed up because that guy was Joker. Interesting. A DC spokesperson downplays any tensions and says Gunn was busy directing the Max series Peacemaker in Atlanta, which had lost a day of production due to Hurricane Helen, while Safran was sick. A Warner spokesperson notes that a DC logo appears at the end of the Joker sequel. Phillips declined to comment for this story. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So it seems like one source is like kind of saying like, kind of cringe that Phillips didn't want anything to do with DC, considering that the only reason why the movie was successful is because it was a DC movie. And I mean, that is true to some extent, right? Like, or to a large extent. If you had just made Joker as like a taxi driver, king of comedy homage, we'll say, if we want to be charitable and not call it a blatant ripoff, like if you just make that movie and it's not Joker related, it simply is never going to have made $1 billion. I mean, that's just a fact. That's just the reality of the situation. So, I mean, you could say that to a certain extent, Todd Phillips maybe should have had some more, I don't know, like grace to at least put like the DC branding on the movie in a more blatant way. But I can also understand that. I mean, the Jokester it's barely a DC movie at all. I mean, it's really not. And I mean, I can respect it to a certain extent. And I don't. Again, it's hard to say because we weren't there during the behind the scenes. We don't know if there actually is any serious animosity between the two parties. We don't know if James Gunn and Peter Safran even wanted to be attached to Joker 2. Obviously, looking back in hindsight, it's for the best. But yeah, I mean, the article is kind of painting it to be that Phillips was maybe like disrespectful towards James Gunn and Peter Safran in that sense. But yeah, I mean, the DC spokesperson, they mention here in parentheses that the DC spokesperson that they were talking to is kind of saying that that's not really the case, which I don't know. I guess I'm kind of more inclined to believe. I mean, at least until I hear differently, it just also does seem like James Gunn, he just seems to work well with people. Like all the actors that he works with and people that when they talk about their experiences with him, they tend to be very, very complimentative. So I would assume that James Gunn was probably just like understood Todd Phillips, and he was like, "Okay, listen, I don't want to put you in a corner, and obviously you've proved yourself with the first movie, so here you go. Like, well, we're not going to fight you on that. But at the end of the day, we don't really know. Now that the dust has settled on the sequel's disastrous opening weekend, plenty of soul searching is taking place on the Burbank lot. The overarching question being asked is, why spend $200 million to make and nearly $100 million to market? A tentpole that ignores the DC fanbase. And ignores, maybe putting it mildly. As a Rolling Stone review of the film succinctly put it, Joker Folie has a message for fans. Go fuck yourselves. See, I gotta be honest. Well, actually, the first thing I'll say is that why spend $200 million to make? I don't understand where those $200 million went. Because when you look at the movie, like I've read the reports that Joaquin Phoenix, they paid him $50 million to be in the movie, which is, although again, to a certain extent, I can kind of understand that it's like, okay, well, convincing Joaquin Phoenix to come back, I mean, you kind of have to pay him whatever he's asking for because you can't do the movie without him. So I guess, sure, pay him whatever he wants. I guess Lady Gaga got paid $12 million. And then Todd Phillips, maybe, I'm not sure if as a director, because usually directors aren't going to necessarily make as much money as like big actors. So I don't know. We'll just say he got paid like, I don't know, $30 million. That's although I doubt it would have even been that much. So I guess with that, right, you have like 62. So you have $92 million for like those three salaries. And by the way, I don't actually know. This is kind of an estimation, but either way, you still have like over $100 million left over that you're making this movie with. I don't know where that money went. Because when you watch Joker Folie, it's like the movie takes place in Arkham and in the courthouse. There's like a scene that takes place on the street. And don't get me wrong, the movie looks beautiful. Like, I'm not saying that there isn't production value there, but $100 million, like over $100 million, potentially around like 130, 140, 150 million dollars used for the actual production of the movie. I don't know where that money goes. So like at the end of the day, like this is ultimately a failure on Warner Brothers. I think that, like, I understand that the first Joker movie made $1 billion, but and so they probably went, okay, well, Todd Phillips wants this, and it's probably a safe bet that this movie's going to make a bunch of money. But they simply didn't need to spend that much money on this movie. Like, I don't, like, the idea that you needed that much money to make it, I don't believe it, because I don't know where it went in the actual movie itself. And I do think that overly inflated Hollywood movie budgets is becoming a massive problem. It's becoming the main reason why a lot of these movies are not becoming financially viable, is because they just keep on throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at these movies when the audience demand doesn't justify it. Marvel's doing it, Star Wars is doing it with their TV shows, and I think it's a big problem. I think that there was like a period of 6 or 7 years in the 2010s where movies were just making $1 billion left and right. And it just seems like that time is over. And yeah, Hollywood just needs to rein their budgets in. And now I will say this other paragraph here where it says that the movie is telling fans to go fuck themselves. I just don't agree with that. Like, okay, so I guess minor spoilers. No, not minor spoilers. I am going to spoil something in the movie. I think people are saying that because in the second movie, Arthur doesn't end up becoming the Joker, and he ends up getting like killed or whatever because like the Joker supporters are like disappointed in him, and one of the Joker supporters stabs him, and it's just like, and people see that as like as a betrayal of the first movie. People see them as like see that as like the people, I guess, see the fans represented in the Joker or something like that. And I just like, I don't understand where that's coming from. I feel like when I watch the movie, if anything, the fans are Lady Gaga's character. They're Harley Quinn, where they viewed Arthur Fleck as the Joker. And this is, by the way, this is the interpretation that I always had from the first movie, which is just that Arthur Fleck isn't the Joker. He never was the Joker. He was never going to be the Joker. And my interpretation, I guess, was right. So, pat on the back for me. Because Todd Phillips basically confirmed with the second one that, like, yeah, he's not the Joker. He was never going to live up to that idea that you had in your minds about him. But like, I just, and that's what I feel like the second movie is about. But I don't, like, can we stop being so dramatic about everything? Like, it's not, they're not attacking the fans. Like, it's okay for you to not like a movie. It's okay for you to not like a direction, or to not like a direction that a movie goes in. But it's like, you're not being attacked. Like, what are you, what are you talking about? Like the movie, Todd Phillips having his vision for his character that maybe you either misunderstood or maybe he just didn't do the best job of getting across. That's not an attack on you. That's not an insult to you. I do think that like the overwhelming negativity surrounding this movie, and not even the overwhelming negativity, but just the anger that people have about it is just like calm down. Like, Jesus Christ, like it's okay for a movie to be bad and for you to not like it, and you don't have to take it as personally as I'm seeing a lot of y'all take it. Even Variety sitting here seemingly taking it. But yeah. Alas, the fanboys and fangirls stayed home, resulting in a domestic opening for Phillips' follow-up to his 2019 Joker. An enormous success that just cost $60 million. Because, yeah, like, the first Joker cost like $60 million. I almost feel like there's more variety in locations in the first Joker than the second one. And even when you take into account like the musical sequences, it's like they didn't look that expensive. I'm sorry, I don't understand how you make the first Joker for $60 million and then you just needed $200 million for the second one. It does not make any sense to me whatsoever. And it earned $1.1 billion. Such disregard for the base has brand repercussions. I mean, that at the end of the day, like these are the facts, right? Like, clearly people, when they heard about what the movie was about, I assume they spoiled it for themselves. They decided they just didn't want to go watch it, which I will say at the end of the day, like, it is kind of shocking. Like, I get it that a bunch of people just aren't interested in Todd Phillips basically confirming what he was trying to say with the first movie. But it is still shocking that they just ignored the second one. Like, that's pretty crazy. After all, Joker is not some obscure character. The Batman foil is by far the most high-profile villain in comics, spanning either DC or Marvel. But given that Phillips made such a wildly profitable first Joker for Warner Brothers, not to mention 3 Hangover movies, Motion Picture Group's chief Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdy seemed unwilling to say no to their prized director with their first greenlight. The movie began production in December 2022, 2 months after Gunn and Safran took control of DC, and many expected the duo to provide notes and feedback on the R-rated musical, especially given the capital outlay involved. But Phillips balked and would only liaise with DeLuca and Abdy. And he has done little to dispel the appearance of friction, even though Gunn and Safran were on hand for the first director's cut screening for the studio. When asked by Collider Report if the production process changed when the pair succeeded DC head Walter Hamada or if they had any input, Phillips replied, with all due respect to them, this is kind of like a Warner Brothers movie. Okay, so this is interesting. So I wasn't necessarily super clear on the timeline, but so it seems like Gunn and Safran did in fact take over of DC, still went in a time where it's like they very well could have like taken this in as a DC Studios movie. So that is interesting, right? that, yeah, it seems like there just was a wholesale, just clear-cut rejection of Gunn and Safran by Todd Phillips. And yeah, I mean, I would assume that, again, he probably did just have the clout to be able to do that. And do I think that at the end of the day, was it the right or the wrong move? I mean, maybe Gunn and Safran could have given notes that would have helped, but at the end of the day, I don't think that the main problem with Joker, I don't even necessarily know if it's just the quality of the filmmaking as much as just the general direction that the story went. And at the end of the day, like, the main problem with Joker Folie Deux is just the fact that it probably should have never been made in the first place. Like, if there was this massive disconnect with what Todd Phillips was trying to say with the first Joker movie and the people that watched it, then any further exploration of that franchise and any further clarification that Todd Phillips were to have done with it, it was always going to land badly, because Arthur Fleck was never going to evolve into the Joker. I mean, he just wasn't. So yeah, it's interesting. It just feels like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I will say this as well. I'd much rather see this than like The Flash, which was like a $300 million disaster that doesn't even feel like a movie directed by somebody. It feels like a movie directed by studio executives, putting their grubby little fingers in, and, like, it feels like complete soulless slop. Joker, say what you will about Joker Folie Dicks, it doesn't feel like that. It still feels like a movie. It still feels like a piece of art made by an artist. And at the end of the day, I'd much rather have that than something that Todd Phillips didn't want to do. I at the end of the day, like, I feel like the biggest problem here is that $200 million price tag. Because if he had made another movie for $60 million, or maybe 70, even 70, $80 million, then I think they would have been fine. It really is just the hubris of making $1 billion and then insisting on spending $200 million when there's no reason to do that. But anyways. Okay. And even Warner Brothers' feedback was sometimes ignored. Sources say Zaslav met one-on-one with Phillips shortly after Warner Media and Discovery merged in April 2022, and was open to filming in Los Angeles if the director would make the sequel at a lower price point. Interesting. Okay, the studio preferred London, where it would have cost about 20% less, but Phillips insisted on shooting in Los Angeles, and the budget didn't change. See, I mean, this is just one of those times where I feel like you have to just, like, put your foot down and be like, hey, Phillips, we don't want to make this movie for $200 million. Like, we don't. You're shooting in London, or you're not making the movie. But I also imagine that, to a certain extent, this is probably a movie that Todd Phillips didn't want to make in the first place. And he only made it because the studios insisted that he did it. That's also kind of a vibe that I get. I don't know that for sure, but it kind of feels like that's the case, right? So I also do wonder if it's almost like a scam situation. Not necessarily that Todd Phillips purposely made the movie bad, because I don't think he did. I think most people just have a problem with the direction that the story went. Which, again, in my opinion, if you take the interpretation of Joker the way that Todd Phillips meant it to be taken, this is the natural conclusion of that story. But my guess is that Todd Phillips never wanted to even clarify himself, but he was forced to. But yeah, maybe he was just like, yeah, I don't even want to be making this movie, but if I am going to make it, then I need an ass load of money. And so maybe that's just his thing. Is like, nah, I want to shoot in Los Angeles. I want to shoot near where I live. I don't want to fly out to London. You're making me make this movie. So we're staying in Los Angeles, and I'm getting my $200 million. And I guess Zaslav was looking at that $1 billion price tag, and he was just salivating like a little dog, and he eventually acquiesced. But I just think that even if your previous movie made $1 billion, if you don't need to spend $200 million, then don't do it. Just don't do it, because this can always happen, right? Captain Marvel made $1 billion. The Marvels didn't come anywhere near that. There is no guaranteed $1 billion a check that you can check in Hollywood. It just doesn't exist anymore. I don't think. Unless we're talking about like Avengers Secret Wars or whatever. Anyways. A Warner's spokesperson says the studio supported the decision to film in Los Angeles, and the Zaslav Phillips confab was merely a meet and greet where they discussed what else the director wanted to make there. Insiders say studio brass did not want to debut the film at the Venice Film Festival as it had done 5 years ago with Joker, but Phillips pushed back. The Warner's spokesperson says the studio fully supported the decision to bring the film to Venice. So this is interesting here. It looks like Variety has its sources that are kind of claiming things, and then their studio spokespeople that are like, actually, that's not true. Who knows? I guess exactly like who's telling the truth here. But yeah. Other battles of will between Phillips and Warner's ensued. Phillips refused to test screen Joker 2, so its premiere in Venice marked the first time an audience saw it. The critics rejected it, and the film tallied a disastrous 33% score on Rotten Tomatoes, well before earning a dismal D cinema score. To put that grade into context, the much reviled Madam Web landed a C+ earlier this year. A Warner spokesperson says, given the film contains spoilers, the studio did not want to unnecessarily divulge plot points too early to test audiences, but rather allow moviegoers to discover the film in their own time. So clearly Warner Brothers, they knew what was up. They knew what was going to happen. Because, I mean, it's just interesting. I never realized, I guess I didn't realize that I was like one of the few people that even understood what Todd Phillips was trying to say with the first Joker movie. Because I never went into this movie expecting for Arthur Fleck to become the Joker. That's just never what I expected. Because that's not the interpretation that I took from the first Joker movie. I thought it was fairly obvious that Arthur did not become the Joker. Like, his actions may have inspired the Joker movement. I think it may have inspired, right, the actual Joker to come about. But he himself was never going to be the Joker. And I actually don't mind Joker Folie Do. I think that it I think it actually works with the first movie like pretty well, where the first movie is about how society can sort of create and nurture a disturbed man like Arthur Fleck, and how like society and the system had let him down and whatnot. And then I think the second movie is about how after this kind of person is created, how does society react to that? How does fanatics like Harley Quinn, how do they celebritize him in an unhealthy way? How does the system, like that psychologist, not want to accept that Arthur Fleck just is who he is? He's not the Joker. The Joker didn't do what Arthur did, or Arthur just did it. And it's like this the way that we kind of look at these like serial killer people, and perhaps overly overcomplicate them. I feel like those are like the interesting questions that the second movie it asks, but again, it's not about the Joker, and I don't think any of these movies ever were about the Joker. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was obvious with the first Joker movie, but apparently I was wrong. Making a sequel to a $1 billion movie, whether it's Aquaman or Joker, is considered a smart bet. But with its outsized budget, which included $20 million up front for Phoenix, $20 million for Phillips, and $12 million for Gaga, the film needed to make at least $450 million theatrically to break even. now, okay, so they're saying that didn't they say earlier that Joaquin was paid $50 million, or did I just read that somewhere else? I know I definitely read that somewhere else, but are they saying here in this article that Phoenix was paid $20 million? What is happening? Okay, I'm not sure. That's a little confusing. I mean, listen, either way, like the at the end of the day, the even with the budget that, putting aside what they paid the actors and Todd Phillips, like they still would have had like a more than $100 million left over to make the movie with. It's too much money, and it's not reflected on the screen. So I still just don't understand what went on with that. Um, sorry, now I lost my place. Okay, here we are. So yeah, and it needs apparently $450 million theatrically just to break even, which it's not. I don't think it's going to do that. Warner Brothers is already on the back foot following a series of recent money losers, including Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. By the way, I will never forgive you personally watching this video for not watching Furiosa. You are a horrible person. I don't think that you deserve good things in your life because you failed society by not watching Furiosa. I just felt like I needed to point that out. Aquaman and Lost Kingdom and The Color Purple. The parent company's stock price remains in the cellar near an all-time low at $7 a share. So that's I believe that's not good. As they say in the business. This is a black eye for Warner Brothers at a key time, with the industry expecting a hit, says Wall Street analyst Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities. The timing could not be worse. Joker Folie addicts also may have suffered from not having Bradley Cooper's voice at the table. Cooper, who was a producer on 2019's Joker and is known for his commercial instincts, including his low-budget hit A Star is Born, with Gaga, was not involved with the sequel after dissolving his producing partnership with Phillips in 2021. I wasn't even aware that he was involved with the first one, I'm not going to lie. No one could get through to Todd, says one source directly involved with the film, and the one thing about genre stuff, if you don't listen and pay attention to what the fan expectations are, you're going to fail. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? I think that, like, at the end of the day, like I said, mentioned before, I can respect an artist having his vision and just making his movie. As a fan, that's something that I can always respect. But if you're going to do that, you have to make certain exceptions. It's like Todd should have taken a lower budget if this is the movie that he wanted to make. He should have gone out and shot it in London. Oi, I can't believe Todd Phillips is filming in my country. Like, he should have made certain concessions. If this was the movie that he wanted to make, and and that's really the matter of it, right? Like, I know that there's always these conversations of like, oh, Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, they're like, oh, Marvel ruined cinema, and oh, I can't make my movies anymore. And it's like, well, the reason why you couldn't get traditional theatrical distribution for The Irishman is because you insisted on making these stupid de-aging, or you insisted on using the stupid de-aging technology. Like, if you had just casted younger actors and aged them up with makeup, you probably could have made that movie, The Irishman, for like, I don't know, like $70-80 million. And I guarantee that you could have gotten traditional studio funding and traditional theatrical distribution. But you insist on, like, you hate on Marvel because they're these stupid, what did he call them? Like, amusement ride blockbusters. And then you make a massively budgeted movie where the only reason why you're making it a massive budgeted movie is because you want people to soy face because, oh, look, it's Robert De Niro in another Martin Scorsese mobster movie. Like, it's like I understand that maybe a lot of these people that are like, I want to make real films, are maybe frustrated in, at the industry right now because it's not as easy to make the movies that they want to make. But it's also, I also find myself not being as empathetic when they themselves are actively making it harder on themselves. So yeah, I mean, that is just a thing to think about, I guess. In fact, catering to the fan base was supposed to be the strategy. When the Zaslav era began, the CEO touted a 10-year plan for DC that would take a page from the Marvel playbook, in which all films adhere to the singular vision of President Kevin Feige. Yet somehow, the Joker sequel was allowed to skirt that mandate, with Phillips operating in an alternate silo from the newly installed DC chiefs. Not surprisingly, the core fans revolted, and the result is damage to the brand. I don't know that I agree that the brand is damaged, just because these I don't know that anybody's gonna look at James Gunn's Superman and be like, ugh, well, they did that with Joker Folie dicks, so I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know that I agree that there is gonna, at the end of the day, be much brand damage or whatever, but we'll see. Maybe. This is a Speed 2 level of disaster, with Warner Brothers massively overspending on a sequel, only to see its audience all but abandon the film domestically, says box office analyst Jeff Bach of Exhibitor Relations. Warner Brothers has the biggest hit of the fall season in Beetlejuice 2, and now likely the largest flop too in Joker 2. Such is the way of the sequel. The truth is, the creators of Joker 2 went in a direction that the majority of audiences didn't want to follow. Ultimately, choices were made, and unfortunately, they didn't align with movie goers' tastes. So, I mean, yeah, that's just obviously true, right? Yeah. In any case, that's what this article is saying, right? That it's not, studio meddling didn't ruin Jokester 2, you know. James Gunn and Peter Safran didn't ruin Jokester 2 Folie dicks. This is the movie that Todd Phillips wanted to make. Nobody else wanted him to make it. You know, I don't think that there's like a culture war element either of like, oh, well, Hollywood, they think that you liked Joker 1 in the wrong way, and so now we need to make a movie to set the record straight. It's like, I don't even think that that's it. I just think that Todd Phillips made a movie in 2019, and I think people misunderstood what he was trying to say. And then because that movie made too much money, he was forced to clarify his vision with a sequel, and people didn't like the way he clarified his vision. But I don't think he did it to piss anybody off. I just think he made the movie that he felt was true to his vision. And I think that at the end of the day, I think all that's well and good, but maybe film in London next time you're put in this situation, Todd. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.